Okie dokie, everybody. Welcome back to the We Shall Not Sleep podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today. I want to thank you so much for your listenership for yet almost another year. Oh my goodness. More on that next week and the weeks to come. But holy cow, what an amazing, amazing thing over the last few weeks and months and everything else that has been going on in this podcast. All your patience and with the fact that I've been moving and settling into a new routine and just a new stage of life. And so for wherever you are, however you might be listening, I just want to thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. And hopefully it's these little segments this week are a little bit more uplifting and encouraging spiritually to you all. I also would like to let you know that we have some cool guests coming, hopefully by the end of this year and coming out in 2026. I really want to get back to that. It's something that in the midst of grad school, it's been very difficult to have that balance, and I'm starting to figure that out now. And there's more conversations as I've been opened up to a new world in grad school, pursuing 2 master's degrees at the same time, that I have the opportunity to really ask some really cool people some questions that I think is quite pertinent to our situation as a church in the United States. And since I have access, it's going to just part of just this academic renewal. And part of that was really put together for last week's episode, when I basically was giving you like a good recommendation reading list on some just basic fundamentals. And with apologetics, theology, history, devotions, and practical applications when it comes to leadership. But I also wanted to take some time this week to really describe what I'm currently reading and what has really captured my attention here. And as of late, I have been slowly working through this very daunting book. It's by the author Tom Holland, not the actor, but the British historian. It's called Dominion, and it's How the Christian Revolution Remade the World. And in this book, what he goes on to describe as someone who was raised, cradle Catholic, but then became an atheist, he felt drawn back to Christianity partly because he realizes he can't escape it. He refers to Paul being the seedbed that is the baseline, like foundation, like the base layer foundation of our culture, or the depth charge, as he refers to in many interviews about this book, Dominion, because the Pauline corpus and ethics and everything that Paul takes from Jesus and then applies, it's still what we view today as virtues, like in leadership, for example, or vices, and moral failings, and how do we conduct ourselves, and what Christendom, how it conducted itself and separated itself for the next 2 millennia. And essentially what he says, the West is in a goldfish bowl. We are the fish, but Christianity is the water. And we are swimming in it no matter whether or not we like it or not. We are living in the cultural milieu of Christian virtue and ethics. So like that's something that I have found absolutely stunning in this book. And I want to read you the back cover because there's a lot of stuff here. And I want to read you a particular page about what this historian interprets Paul. He says this: crucifixion, the Romans believed, was the worst fate imaginable, a punishment reserved for slaves. How astonishing it was then that people should have come to believe that one particular victim of crucifixion, an obscure provincial by the name of Jesus, was to be worshipped as a god. Dominion explores the implications of this shocking conviction as they have reverberated throughout history. Today, the West remains utterly saturated by Christian assumptions. As Tom Holland demonstrates, our morals and ethics are not universal, but are instead the fruits of a very distinctive civilization. Concepts such as secularism, liberalism, science, and homosexuality are deeply rooted in a Christian seedbed. From Babylon to the Beatles, St. Michael to #MeToo, Dominion tells the story of how Christianity transformed the modern world. And that's what he does. And a little bit on Tom Holland himself. He is an award-winning historian of the ancient world and the author of 6 previous books, including Rubicon, recipient of the Hessel Tiltman Prize for History, and shortlisted for the Samuel Johnson Prize and Persian Fire, winner of the Anglo-Hellenic League's Runciman Award, and he lives in London. So quite an accomplished worker, but an author. But I will tell you, there is a page in here that he is interpreting Paul that I would like to read for you all. Paul talking about this. I'm going to back it up and give a little bit of context. He's in the first part of his book, he's actually giving the context of which Paul was writing in, a lot of the history. It's good exegesis if you ask me. I think it's pretty well sound. And he quotes a lot of his letters, and then he adds his commentary to it, which I think the reason why it's powerful to me is it speaks to this whole home church model of when anytime we study Paul, we look at the application, we have a desire to go deep into Scripture. That is something that I see that we're missing. We do it in Bible studies, and preachers will preach maybe a good sermon on it, but what would it be like to take 16, maybe 32 weeks and look at Romans and discuss it for 2-3 hours at a time? What else? Is there any better way to spend our time? If we're going to spend that amount of time watching a football game, why don't we just pour into the Bible? So here's what he has to say. In the consequence of basically there's no slave nor free, Greek or Roman, all are one in Christ Jesus, no male or female. He says, everyone then should be joined together by a common love. Yet even as Paul urged this, he did not push the radicalism of his message to its logical conclusion. A slave might be loved by his master as a brother and renowned for his holiness and blessed with the gift of prophecy, but still remains a slave. We have different gifts, so Paul explained, according to the grace given us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. And if he combine the gifts, then, of course, let him do both. Paul, in urging this manifesto, could at least argue that he practiced what he preached. Willingly, he had abandoned the privileges of his upbringing. Not just as a scribe and a scholar he had inherited from his father, if Luke's history is to be trusted, the rights of a Roman citizen. He rarely stood upon them, though. Fearless in proclaiming what he believed, he perfectly accepted that those placed in authority were entitled to punish him for what he said. Repeatedly, rather than abandon his right to speak in synagogues, he submitted to their codes of discipline. 5 times have I received at the hands of the Jews the 39 lashes. In a similar spirit, and despite his scorn for the pretensions of the Caesars, Paul warned the churches of Rome not to offer open resistance to Nero. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Paul's conviction that only the true citizenship was that of heaven was matched by his determination to exploit the manifestations of earthly authority as effectively as he possibly could. If synagogues offered him a chance to win his fellow Jews for Christ, then he would seize it. If householders in Corinth or Rome provided him with financial backing and with spaces in which his various converts could meet, and with funds to help relieve a famine back in Judea, then he would take full advantage of their generosity. If Roman power upheld the peace that enabled him to travel the world, then he would not jeopardize his mission by urging his converts to rebel against it. Too much was at stake. There was no time to weave the entire fabric of society anew. What mattered, in the brief window of opportunity that Paul had been granted, was to establish as many churches as possible, and thereby to prepare the world for the parousia, for the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. The parousia there, that's a fancy way of saying in the second coming. And that's how we say it in the Greek. And so, this is a point of emphasis that this author is making, like the greater context of how the urgency, and this is something that Pastor James Haldane and I have talked about on this podcast, is this duality of the gospel message. There's this urgency that we have to have everyone saved, but yet there's the long walk of evangelism at the same time. There is this duality there, maybe this dissonance that can occur where it's the conduct of our character, it's our actions, not just in one emotional moment, not in just one For You page highlight or a TikTok video or something where everything is just going swimmingly, like supposedly, and then it all falls apart thereafter. No, this is something that is something that's eternal. So something that's going to draw people there. That's like, oh, it's through all the different seasons. It's through grief. It's through the grief and sorrow, pain, suffering, but also through the highs in life. Yeah, you guys seem to be pretty even-keeled, awesome people. Like, that's awesome. So, these are all great things and virtues, and this book is really chronicling, the history. And again, it's saying, how in the world How in the world did it was crucifixion, which meant by the Romans, that supposedly didn't crucify their own citizens because that's how painful it was and dehumanizing and debilitating it was to even witness, let alone receive as punishment. How in the world did Christians come to wear that symbol around their necks as a show of pride? In boasting in what they viewed as their God who was then crucified. It would be as if our leader, like a leader, was then wearing, got like beheaded by the guillotine, and we just started wearing little guillotine necklaces around our neck. Like it's so bizarre. Like how would you feel about that? So like this is something that people would wear like maybe as a mockery, but like no, they're their own converts doing that. The only believers that wear it is pride. And so Tom looks at the historical thing and goes, that was a sign of power. It was a sign of domination, and subjectivism, like of anyone who crosses Rome. It was sheer terror as a symbol. This is what we'll do to you. And then Christians, like a century later, are just like, yeah, this is a point of pride. It completely flips the script on itself. And he's like, how did that happen? And then how did it continue to persist so long? Why is it that it was Christian abolitionists that pushed for the end of the slave trade? It wasn't any other religion that brought them there. Sure, people fell short, but it was eventually people coming to the revelation that, wait a minute, our beliefs in this thing teaches us something else. The inspiration was derived from the Holy Scriptures, and it's all right there. It's not from any other belief system that you could get that all men, for example, were created equal, as I've argued before on this channel regarding the founding of America and everything. It doesn't mean that we live up to our principles, but you can't say that it's not Christian by any means. So that's that one I'm looking at. You can find this really cheap right now, especially the paperback on Amazon. It is very, very cheap. I'll link that in the show notes below. And then the one I just got done, I will certainly link it for anyone who would like to follow. I just got done reading C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, and then I've immediately gone into his defense, basically, of that as the problem of pain. And, A Grief Observed was about his grief of losing his wife. He knew that she had battled cancer, much like his mother unfortunately did. And he knew that it would come back, just like he witnessed with his mom. He knew the medicine wouldn't do its job back then. And so he went and married her anyway, and then she died 3 years later. And just the foreword by his stepson is very moving. And so here he is, roughly 10 years after writing The Problem of Pain. He's actually going through it himself. Before all that happened, he wrote a treatise and an apology on pain and why the pain and suffering of life doesn't actually disprove God. And so I will link both of those if you like those classics, just because of what we're in. For those of you who are tempted for just the emotional side of Christianity, it is emotional. God gave us our emotions, but maybe you feel very distant from God when you experience suffering versus maybe more calmness or peace. That's just something that I would like to offer you, that even the hardest of Christians, those who appear to be, quote unquote, holier than thou, those who appear to be more pious also suffer too. And I think it's incredibly human. And here's the thing too, to bring it back full circle, the book of Hebrews talks about this. It talks about the fact that he too actually he too can identify with us. And I just got to find this here. I believe it's it says, Hebrews 2:10, that God made the author of salvation perfect through sufferings. And let me see. I apologize here. This is fantastic. I think it's Hebrews 4:15, I believe, where it says this. I don't want to get this wrong. I'll read from the ESV actually. I think it's also Hebrews 5:8, maybe. Yeah. So In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. And so he can identify with that. And in Hebrews 4, like the end of Hebrews 4 says, Jesus, the great high priest. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who is in every aspect has been tempted, and we are yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Like, time of need, we already have somebody who's already walked that. He can help. And yet C.S. Lewis, as a man, we're living 2,000 years removed from the incarnation as far as in the flesh, like the disciples saw, as well as Paul witnessed. And here we have people who are Christians, and they can also demonstrate through their writings that it's not all perfect either all the time. So this is some things just to consider, and especially as you get towards the holidays. I know the holidays aren't always great for everybody. They remind people of a lot of different times in their lives. So I just want to offer that up today. Thank you for your consideration. I hope that you pick up these books in addition to the ones last week, but just we consider the ones that I'm reading today. So thank you everyone so much for your time. May God bless you, and may God keep you.